have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. So I want to say right up front, a big thank you to people who are listening, because we've got a lot to do today, and you might want to put this on pause and come back to it later. We might record 2 episodes right now. We just don't know exactly where we're going to go. But let's start with that title. So Speaker Johnson will not be raptured. There's a historical context for this. We want to get into that. We need to do a couple of disclaimers along the way, and then we'll get to the actual story of what's happening here and why Speaker Johnson is involved. So with that, Jim, I'm going to kick it your way now. This is a great episode. We've been wanting to do something like this for a while. So
well, and it just happens to come up in the news thanks to Breaking Points,
yeah,
which is one of my news sources. They told this story, and we'll get into what the story is in a moment. It has to do with Speaker Johnson, Red Heifers, and the end of time. Okay, yep. That's all we'll say for the moment. But I have to jump out in front of the episode and lay out some disclaimers.
Yes, and by the way, when Jim says these, they apply to the show as well as to us as individuals. So I'm going to allow you to say that and just assume that you're going to say what I feel as well.
Okay, thank you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but anytime you discuss anything having to do with the nation of Israel, you end up going into a potential ground where you're going to be discussing something where someone's going to claim, oh, you don't support the program, you're an anti-Semite. I am not. And so I want to lay out a few disclaimers before we get too far down the track. I want to say exactly who I am and where I'm at on this. And I guess where we're at.
Where we're at.
1/3 of all Jews were killed worldwide during World War II. 1/3 of their race destroyed. There are now approximately 16 million Jews on the planet. That's 0.2%, not even a full percent, 0.2% of the world population. In the US, we have quite a few more. It's 6 to 7 million Jews just in the United States alone. And they still only make up 2.4% of the US population. Yet, 22% of Nobel Prize recipients and 27% of them in the sciences are Jews. And I want to be clear, there's a site called jewishachievement.com. They've gathered the data I'm about to share with you. I want to make sure we attribute honestly to them because they are very concerned. It's obvious on their site they're concerned about copyright. But in the sciences, 1/4 of the Fields medals, which is mathematics, the winners are Jews. America's leading symphony orchestras have been led by Jewish conductors 1/3 of the time. They've created nearly 2/3 of Broadway's longest running musicals. They're movie directors who have earned Oscars. 38% of those have been Jews. So this is a people who through time has managed to keep and hold on to their identity, to a set of traditions for a period of over 5,000 years to come to a point now that they're still in existence. Name any other culture that has this. It's very rare. There are other cultures that have this, but it's very rare that things get carried that long, that deeply, and that profound under the amount of pressure that Jews have felt. Because what happened in World War II was not the first time. And let me be clear. My primary problem with the Jewish state is that it's a state. And a state is a license to use force to coerce people to do what you want. I constantly sit here. There hasn't been an episode. I doubt there's been an episode where I haven't at least once criticized my own government and said we should not have a state. I am an anti-statist. Okay? That philosophy is completely wrong, in my opinion, that we need to use coercive force to achieve social goals. I don't believe in it. So I have the same problem with Israel that I have with every other state on the planet. Okay? Like everyone who picks sides, everyone seems to feel that they need to pick sides in various disputes, including this one. And I don't necessarily think that's true. Like a lot of times I can look at two sides of something and say, you're both awful. And, but I could say you're both awful and then add, but God loves you anyway. because we are Gracearchy. I find it very understandable. In fact, I have friends who are Jewish, and I've talked to them about this, and I understand their heartfelt belief that having a homeland that they can come back to is important.
Definitely, and especially perhaps for Jewish people.
Yes, given what they've been through historically, okay? So my concern here, and anybody that wants, there will be people who choose to misread what I say. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Like, it just goes with the territory. But I'm trying to speak to the people who are reasonable right now, the people who are of good faith, and say to you, this is not about this episode is not about the existence of the Israeli state. It's about my disappointment with people who have violated the command of Revelation 22, 18 and 19, that says you're not to add to the words of this book, you're not to subtract from them. And these are a bunch of people who've done a lot of adding, we're going to talk about today. And I mean an awful lot of adding.
An awful lot.
And I'm not interested in what it is that they have to offer. Their adding has not been helpful. I am also further concerned about the international and anti-peace implications of this belief system. This belief system is a pro-war belief system.
And by the way, when we say belief system, people, just don't jump to conclusions there, because we'll be very specific about what that belief system is coming up.
It's called dispensationalism. So we will get very deeply into exactly that's what we're going to do most of this episode. So that's my caveat up front. God bless the Israel. God bless America. God bless everyone. But I'm not pro-war. I'm not pro-U.S. intervention. I don't believe in the state, whether it's that state or another. I understand why you would want a homeland. I get all that. Okay?
And just for the record here, let me just say one word: ditto. Why don't you just tell us the groundwork, and then we'll expand out from there. So what are Red Heifers doing in
Okay,
Jerusalem?
so this is mind-blowing. Mike Johnson is the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. It's 435 representatives. He's the top guy. He's the leader. And he is been Speaker since late 2023. Before he became Speaker and subsequent to being Speaker, he has been involved in an activity that has caught the attention of some journalists. And when I saw this story, I was kind of wide-eyed, stunned. It's a story that was not told in my youth to me. It's a story that has developed since. This story has continued to evolve because dispensationalism believes there will be a rapture followed by a 7-year tribulation, followed by a millennial where Christ will reign. And this is part of a doctrinal hermeneutical system, meaning this is how they interpret their Bible, that I grew up around, and that, frankly, more than 10 million people currently in the United States believe.
Many. This was sort of the core of evangelical Christianity. Yeah. When I was in high school, I remember people talking.
Okay, so in the 1970s, it was Hal Lindsey, who we'll get into.
Yep.
And in the 1990s and early 2000s, it was Tim LaHaye with his Left Behind series.
Yep.
These were common. So Lindsey's book is the most the best-selling work of nonfiction in the 1970s. I used air quotes for people that are listening instead of watching. Nonfiction, written in the 1970s. He sold more books than any other author in the nonfiction arena, called The Late Great Planet Earth. That was the name of that book. And it was about these events that are to come. The red heifer, the notion of a red heifer is necessary because it is involved in the rebuilding of the temple. And it's a step that precedes rebuilding the temple. The idea is that before you can enter God's temple, you had to be purified, and the purification would occur through these very expensive, specialized bulls. They would kill these. They weren't even allowed to be pull plows. They were set aside specially for this purpose. They were rare and special and set aside for this purpose. And this goes back to a command that's given to Moses and Aaron all the way back in the book of Numbers. They have been able to draw a line and say, well, we have to do this before we can rebuild the temple, and the rebuilding of the temple is necessary to bring about the apocalypse. And we need to talk about what the true meaning of apocalypse is in the course of this discussion. But this is an event that has to happen in their mind in order to achieve this result.
You used a word to describe that. in our conversation, which I know I'm going to have to stop and go back for it, but I think it was immanentize
immanentize the eschaton.
Immanentize the eschaton. There we go.
Yes, we
there's
talked
some fancy
about this in episode 104. Episode 104, it's really fascinating. You chose to post this online. And I was like, why did you, this episode's, a year ago or whatever. And I'm like, why did Bill share this online? And I went back and listened to it at 1.5 speed, which is about the speed I can take me. And I was, that's a timeless podcast. So people should just go back and listen to it anyway. But, and we'll put it down in the show notes. But I went back and listened to it again over the weekend before we come here and sit down to record this show, because this same thought came up through my head here, that you have a group of people who are attempting to bring about the end times. They are actively working to bring about the end of days. They want Armageddon.
I'd correct that and say you have yet another group.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Because
and in fact,
there's
tons of nuance. And in fact, I have notes here about like all the different ways that this that this can go if you're interpreting the Bible. There is a guy named Byron Stinson. What you need to know about him is that he is a rancher, and he took it upon himself. He believed he had a calling from the time that he was a teenager to basically recreate the red heifers. He made it his life's mission to recreate them and bring them to Shiloh, which is in modern day Palestine, to a place that you and I could not get access to right now. But the Israeli government was more than happy to cooperate with him in helping him get these there. There is also an import ban on cattle from the United States to Israel. It's a protected industry or something there. So they got a special designation to deliver these red heifers to Shiloh as pets. And Byron Stinson is the guy that made all of this possible. He has created a ministry that he has self-funded. It's probably its biggest contributor to my knowledge. I doubt he's its only contributor, but I didn't have time to look into that in the podcast. I did listen to him explain himself and how he got there, because I thought it was important to Steelman and hear him in his own words. He has gotten together with a guy named Rabbi Ishtak Momo, and Ishtak Momo is helping him understand how they need to go about this procedurally. And other rabbis are participating in this, because over in Israel, there actually is a movement to destroy the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim holy site, and rebuild the temple, because they believe the Holy of Holies is located directly where the dome stands today.
So,
and the property in Shiloh where the red heifers are looks directly over the top of the Mount of Olives, right at the Dome of the Rock. Okay.
So the Dome of the Rock is there because they got there second? They got there before the Jewish temple could be rebuilt on the same piece of property?
So the Jewish temple is destroyed in AD 70.
Yep.
And Jesus prophesies that it will be destroyed. He stands there and says, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. But we found out that he was talking about himself as the replacement temple. So he says that, and then at 70, approximately at 70 AD, the Romans come and they literally tear the place down. The only part that's left is a wall that's called the Wailing Wall, because it's a place of weeping for the loss of the temple. And at that point in Judaism, sacrifice stops, because they no longer have the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy of Holies. It's gone.
Say that again, please, because it's important to remember that sacrifice stops.
Sacrifice stops in AD 70 with the destruction of the temple, because they no longer have a Holy of Holies and they no longer have the Ark of the Covenant. So this is the end. It's over. So they are in a pause. This is a state of pause where the only way that could be brought back is to rebuild the temple at that sacred location. And since then, it's been claimed by the Muslims this is a stopping point, a station where Muhammad stopped. There are people who misleadingly say it is one of the most important holy sites. There are several holy sites in Islam. There are three main ones. It is not one of the three main ones. Nevertheless, it would cause an international incident.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Interestingly enough, Israel, when you speak of like convicting somebody of a crime, you say they have means, motive, and opportunity, right? Israel was in a war in 1967, and they had the means and they had the opportunity to destroy the Dome of the Rock at that moment, but they didn't have any motive to do so. They chose not to do it. What has changed between 1967 and now that there is such an active movement, and there are even people in the government of Israel that would cooperate so actively with these actors here in the United States who do not have the best interest of individual Jews at heart? Because understand, if you read the book the way they're reading it, massive amounts of death and destruction are going to occur if you read the book the way they're reading it.
Yeah.
Okay? So they're hastening the occurrence of these events so that they are more likely to happen in the lifetimes of the people who are here. This is their stated objective.
And, with all due respect, if someone were to come and into the holiest place in both Jewish and one of the holiest places in Muslim history and blow it up, that kind of international incident could very well trigger an apocalyptic, conflagration that begins at that place at that moment.
Let us not forget to explain what an apocalypse is before we're done, because it's really, really super important and significant. But back to Speaker Johnson. Now, so Speaker Johnson, on February 1, 2023, so there's an event called the National Prayer Breakfast. This event has existed for quite some time, and every president goes to these events, Democrat or Republican, and Republicans and Democrats said it's a bipartisan event. It has a conservative lean to it, there's no doubt, but both parties come and participate in this event. Each of the presidents since Reagan have been coming to, I think it might even be since Nixon, have been coming and participating in these events. But there is another event that has now being done as near simultaneously to it that is much more radical Christian right, and it is called the National Gathering of Prayer and Repentance. And the theme of this is that we are a terrible, bad, sinful nation that needs to repent of its sins. Those sins include not punishing people who do things that we find morally distasteful hard enough. Not that we're doing these things. We're good people, mind you. We're praying for our country because it's so off. If only our leaders would be much firmer and harder with people who do bad things. This is the National Gathering of Prayer and Repentance, and Speaker Johnson, when he was a mere backbencher representative, as he was in February 1, 2023, there's no whisper or hope that he was going to be part of the leadership. He wasn't part of the leadership. He participated in this event, and he arranged for Rabbi Momo to come and speak. And it just so happened Boris Johnson, former prime minister, was in attendance at this event as well. So he invites him to speak and give a presentation about the need for this coming completion of prophecy. Then exactly 1 year later, now Johnson has become speaker. He has been suddenly elevated from behind the scenes. The speaker is deposed, which was a historic event all by itself. And they went through multiple ballots and couldn't agree on any of the big names. And he emerges as the dark horse candidate, believes that he has been elevated at this moment by God. And now, as Speaker Johnson, with a lot more cachet at this particular event, he invites both Rabbi Momo and Byron Stinson, the rancher, to come and speak. And they make a presentation. And we have elements of that speech. If you watch the link to Breaking Points, you can see a portion of that speech that we'll provide down in the show notes. Now we find out, still a year later from this, that Speaker Johnson made a trip to Shiloh, in occupied Palestine territory, at the site where the red heifers have been delivered. He's there to make an inspection. And he's not jumping in front of cameras while he does this. In fact, in the footage, he's kind of like covering his face and running to the door. But it is clearly Representative Speaker Johnson who is attending and checking in on the delivery of these red heifers that are needed to help usher in the rebuilding of the temple, the destruction of the Dome of the Rock, the rebuilding of the temple, and the resumption of sacrifice to take place in the Holy of Holies there, which is part of the whole Armageddon timeline. So now we have set up enough background as to what it is that brings us here.
Dispensationalism. Can we start with sort of an overview?
Yes. In fact, let me go back a little bit even further than that and let me talk about me.
Yes, I intended this to be personal, so
I've spoken about this before in other episodes. We did an episode on evangelicalism, and we'll put that down in the show notes, where we went into this in some depth. I was raised as a fundamentalist Baptist, and what I'm about to share with you, dispensationalism, if you were to try to narrow it down, there are Pentecostals involved, there are other types of non-denominational people involved, but it is essentially a Baptist view. So Baptists have certain rules about how they, why their denomination is distinct and different. And this system lines up very well with who they are and what their character is. This is how I was raised. So fundamentalists believe in a literal, grammatical, historical interpretation of Scripture. You read the words precisely for what they say. They happened in a time. The words mean what the words mean, and you take those literally as possible. Now, this is not perfect. If you have a conversation with them at any length, you can poke holes in this. They do, it turns out, make exceptions to this. But this is their bent, and this is their drive, and this is what they strive to do when they're at their best. This is where they stand.
This show is brought to you by the Zero Aggression Project. Zap newsletter subscribers get alerts when each episode is released. The Zap website is also the pathway by which you can contact us by email and support the show. This program operates thanks to tax-deductible Zap contributions, and we appreciate your support. So, zap the state, and have a nice day.
So the episode that we did about the Bill Nye the Science Guy having that debate with the
Ken Ham, the creationist.
Yes, Ken. Yes,
it's a literal 6 days at the start of that starts the Earth.
Right. That's a good example.
Yep, it's a very good example. So they then, in their interpretive method, they look through history, which means the Bible, and they divide it into different periods or dispensations where God relates to humanity in distinct ways. So God's relationship with humanity changes. The nature of that relationship changes. Depending on what dispensationalist you're talking to, it's going to be anywhere from 2 to 7 times, but it's normally 7. 7 is normally the division. And the time that we live in now, they call the church age or the age of grace.
Oh, we're right on time. This is good.
3, they are premillennialists. The millennium is the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Now, that may be a literal number, it may be a symbolic number, depending on who you talk to when they're looking at the Bible, but pre, in this case, means that Jesus arrives at the beginning of the millennium. There are people who are post-millennialists, and those people believe that first we have to kind of conquer, and then Jesus comes. That's what dominionism is. So don't confuse the two. There are people who are dominionists. That's a smaller but still significant multi-million number of Americans who hold that view. This is a view that's held by far more Americans. They believe that it's still a small amount, but relatively speaking, I'm going to guess that number exceeds 10 and maybe even 15 million people who believe this based on some research I did beforehand. Before then, the millennium, number 4, before the millennium, they believe that there's going to be a tribulation, a period of intense suffering for the entire planet, during which there's going to be a beast that rises and controls the world. They frequently misuse the term Antichrist for this. It's almost always 7 years in length. There's some people that will vary on that, but almost all of them are going to say it's going to be 7 years long. And you might recognize this, as we said, from the aforementioned Left Behind. Left Behind, it was 16 books, and 80 million copies of that book were sold, of these books were sold, total. Before that, the best-selling nonfiction book of the 70s, Late Great Planet Earth, finished out the 20th century. So these are numbers dating to up to 1999, selling 35 million copies. And it was made into a theatrical release that my family went to see in a theater when I was a kid. And then the rapture. There's debate about when that's supposed to happen. So this is a distinct coming that occurs before the actual second coming. So Jesus was here for his first coming. He was born in a manger and crucified on a cross and resurrected and ascended. That was his first coming. His second coming This is separate. They introduce a new thing where he doesn't quite come to the earth. He pulls up his people to join him. This is the main feature of the Left Behind movies that Kirk Cameron was in. Like, he's a pilot on a plane. All of a sudden, these people are pulled out, right? What happened to all these people? There's debate within this community about whether this happens before, during, or after the tribulation. By far, most of the people who believe in this view say there will be a rapture that precedes this tribulation, where Christians, good people, will be pulled out of the world before all this bad judgment happens. And you can see how convenient and popular this idea instantly is. Oh, we have a ticket to get out of this mess? Fantastic. Let the Armageddon begin. I'm going to share an embarrassing story right now. I was brought up with movies, The Thief in the Night, and you could stay on the screen for this. Thief in the Night.
No, I want you to be fully screen embarrassed.
Thief in the Night and Distant Thunder. The Thief in the Night was about this rapture event. That was the main thing. Thief in the Night. That's how Jesus would come. Like, everybody would be surprised, and there would be some explanation that the people left behind would make for this event. This was a cheesy, low-budget 1970s movie that was played in churches to scare the heck out of teenagers so that they would accept Jesus and avoid hellfire. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being pejorative and mean. That was exactly what they intended. I went to see Distant Thunder with a room full of people as a teenager, and that was the whole point. They did the whole altar call. They were really trying to get us to, make sure we weren't going to be left behind. Okay, so that's a little bit later. The story I'm going to tell you is a little bit younger. I am very innocent. I want to point out my innocence in this particular situation. We had a Christian radio station, and I had a clock radio on my bed, and I was flipping through the stations while I was in bed late at night. And in War of the Worlds style, the local Christian radio station came on with a news break and said that moments ago, millions of people vanished from the earth, and we do not know what happened to them. There is reports of calamity all over the place. Planes have crashed. We are trying to, digest this information. We will stay tuned to this station for more information. I did not finish listening to this. I jumped up out of my bed. I am probably 11, maybe 12 years old at this point. I jumped up out of my bed and I ran to my parents' bedroom, but my father and stepmother were not in the room. So now I'm really terrified. And I run down the hall. The bathroom door was closed. And I burst through the door, and the shower was running. And both of my dad and my stepmother were in the shower. They thought we were all off to bed asleep. And as innocent as possible, I called out to them because obviously I can't see them in the shower. I called out for them, and they were both there. I mean, I can't imagine what was going through their heads at the moment.
Something completely different than what was going through yours.
Well, I mean, they were horrified. I've just come rushing into the room, and they assured me they were still very much there and encouraged me to go back to bed, that everything was fine. Did you tell
them why you were there?
Oh, no. I was very clear. I told them what was on the radio.
Oh, okay.
And they thought it was just an advertisement for this. So here's the level of terror that I was experiencing at this age, and it is considered legitimate in the community from which I grew up, that it's okay to scare you into righteousness.
Oh, sure.
We're gonna make you right, and we're gonna do it however we need to do it.
Trauma has always been a part of religious practice.
It includes traumatizing you. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
I'm laughing, but that's I had the same.
Oh no, it's a great story.
So.
It's a great story. The first time I told my wife the story, she was crying. I mean, it's just imagining me doing this. And even now, as an adult, obviously, I get they were experiencing their own horror on the other side of the shower curtain.
I'm sure.
That's how much I believed in this idea, or I was taught to believe in it. So I have come now. I got to a point sometime in my early adulthood where I got so tired of this topic, personally speaking, that I stopped having any interest in any conversations, movies, discussion. When Tim LaHaye's wave came along with Left Behind, I did not go see the movies. I did not read the books. Someone gave me one of the books. I don't know where it is. I think I threw it away. I don't throw books away. Like, I was so turned off to this experience. And it wasn't because of that event. It wasn't really because of the manipulation. My initial problem
happened?
was, well, it's newspaper theology. So there was an attempt to try to find the purpose and the meaning in everything that was happening in the news.
Right. I remember this. Yeah, people would look at the paper and
then you would match things up.
Yeah.
So here's a favorite from my time. Back when I was coming up, the European Common Market, it was called, had 7 or 8 nations, and they were looking to add the 9th and soon the 10th nation. And there are 10 horns on one of the beasts in Revelation. And this was a sign that from the last one, there'll be 11th one or an extra one from which the beast will emerge, but it's going to come from these places. And so a theory developed that the Antichrist was a figure, a charismatic figure, as it were, who would emerge from these nations. And they were assembling these nations, and the European Common Market, these were the nations from these nations. This was the revival of the Roman Empire. And this Roman Empire would be the one that would usher in the Antichrist, who, has his own set of acts that he's supposed to commit. The problem is that the European Common Market became the European Union. And the European Union has maybe far more nations in it. And since that's no longer what it says in the newspaper, nobody's saying that anymore.
Yeah.
This constantly evolved. The story they were telling changed radically.
Well, it has to. It's got to conform to the news. So
ChatGPT is an amazing thing. They just came out with level 5. I have an event that I could not completely recall or remember that I asked it to help me solve this morning. Before we came in to do the show, I just, for kicks, like, hey, maybe they'll know it. So my stepmother, the same one that was in the shower, had purchased a book, and the book made a prediction. It said that the Antichrist, who was to come, was going to come out of Egypt, and his name was Anwar Sadat, the president, because he had already done one of the most important things. He had constructed a peace deal with Israel. And that peace deal was the basis for the start of the tribulation. And she was saying we basically were kind of maybe in the tribulation. Now, she was not much of a scholar. But again, I'm now at this point maybe 13 when my stepmother bought this book. And I didn't know who this was. So I did some research this morning, and ChatGPT had to work pretty hard to find this, but they did find it. And when I went and looked up the cover of the book, it was her. It was Mary Stuart Relfe, R-E-L-F-E. I would not have known who this was before this morning. I just remembered the prediction because Anwar Sadat was assassinated later the same year after she released the book. And this command from Revelation 22, not to add or subtract from the book, is the trouble or the perniciousness of a lot of this. They are literally adding to the book. They're trying to find all the signs and tell you what's happening and when and where and why and how it all fits together like some giant puzzle. So you, as a kid, we have these things called prophecy conferences, or have an evangelist come in and speak for the week. And the speaker would hang up this giant bed sheet across the stage, right? Huge, blanket that had a timeline all the way across it that would show you how all the events would be arranged in order and how they were all to occur. And then they would, of course, add some of their own additional commentary on top of that, explaining to you what they thought this might mean. So that, in things like barcodes back in the early 80s, when Mary Stuart Relfe was writing, were marks of the beast. They eventually were going to imprint this on our right hand or on our forehead. Yep. And we were going to have this. So they had figured this out. And it's that phenomena that turned me off. It's this constant, this story has been retold so many different ways since it was invented in the 1840s. That's right. I said invented in the 1840s. This is not a 2,000-year-old belief system. It was invented in the 1840s, and it has evolved and developed with the times so that it makes the Bible less important than your newspaper in some ways. And there's these tenuous lines that they connect. So let me tell you theologically what one of the most tenuous lines is, okay? To get to what they believe in, you have to look at the book of Daniel, and you have to see that there are so many weeks that translate to years between the time that Daniel made the prophecy and the advent of Christ. And then they put an arbitrary pause in there and say the last 7 years never happened, so that the subsequent 7 years will actually be fulfilled in this future time called the tribulation. There is no stitching whatsoever to get you there. This is completely speculative. So I did not want to take Mr. Stinson. I did not want to take Byron Stinson and just chop this guy up. And people, instead of steelmanning people, they strawman them. They take their worst possible attributes and they hold them up and they beat that up. And they're like, oh, look at how I defeated his case. I wanted to see what Stinson's case was. So Stinson's case starts in Numbers with a claim that they need to have these red heifers are needed for the temple, for the use of the temple
as a sacrifice, right?
Yes, but this is going
to be a barbecue.
Yes, it's going to be a sacrifice and barbecue. I mean, but mainly a sacrifice. And these ashes that they're going to mix with certain water is going to be part of a cleansing process that allows them to then go and do their duty, the priests to go do their duty inside the temple. Okay, and this is a piece of conjecture that they have to connect this together. There's no in no other prophetic thread down the line is this described as a necessary step, as a predicate for coming. This is a violation of the Revelation 22 command. There's no predicate there. They went through and discovered this on their own and decided it needed to be done, and they've decided to take it upon themselves rather than wait on God for it to happen. They're going to immanentize the eschaton, which means to bring about our utopia, bring about our grand plan, bring about the end of days.
Now, just for a second here, if I could time out just for a moment. Is there any difference, other than the technical details, between dispensationalists, immanentizing
the eschaton,
and radical Islamists doing the same thing by killing everyone who isn't a Muslim?
By the way, the regime that exists in Iran is very much built on its own similar prophetic evidence. They want a caliphate. They have a certain leader that they expect to come, an imam. They have a prophetic expectation for that. So this is not the only thing. But I wasn't raised in that value system.
Yeah,
and that value system doesn't seem to have a lot of currency in my government. Not only is this getting the speaker, this is also getting a couple other people.
Now, when you say getting, that means that there are people, the
in our government,
the United States government,
of rank,
who are part of this.
Well, not necessarily the red heifers, because I have to be honest with you, this whole Numbers 19 ritual was never discussed. When they hung up the giant bed sheets, the prophecy conferences, they never said this to me. I never remember hearing this.
Yeah.
This is an emerging thing that has happened in the 21st century. The rebuilding of the temple was there, though. That was discussed. And the difficulty of it ever happening with the Dome of the Rock was discussed. There was a picture of the Dome of the Rock in my Bible as a kid because I was told that's where the temple had been located.
That's right. Right.
The politicians I have in mind are Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who coincidentally is not just any ambassador. He is the ambassador to Israel.
Yeah.
And Mike Huckabee is a dispensationalist. He's openly stated this. Now, is he into the red heifer thing? I don't know, but he is a dispensationalist. So in a position of power related to our policy in the Middle East, we have a second figure on top of Johnson, who's obviously taken, as I already explained, a very deep interest in this. And then we have Senator Ted Cruz. Now, Senator Ted Cruz, I was tempted to do an instant grace that I never recorded. And in that instant grace, I wanted to talk about his interview with Tucker Carlson. So he did an interview this summer, here in the summer of 2025, with Tucker Carlson, where Tucker, did his normal debate tactics and ate his lunch. And there was a point at which Ted Cruz said that he was fervently anti-Israel, pro-Israel. It was his number one priority in office to be pro-Israel. And which is an odd thing to say because you're a United States senator. Shouldn't it be the number one priority to serve the people of the United States?
Right.
Well, don't split words with me, Tucker. You know what I mean. Well, no, you're the one that said it, right? But it doesn't stop there. He said, well, I've believed this ever since I grew up in Sunday school, where they said, where God said to Israel, I will bless those who bless thee and curse those who curse thee. We've got to be on Israel's side. It's existentially important that the United States align with Israel. And Tucker said, do you believe that the current state of Israel is what is being described in the Bible? And he said, yes, I do. And he said, well, could you give me chapter and verse on that, please? He goes, oh, Tucker. He's like, I'm busy. I'm a senator. I can't quote. And by the way, I feel for him at this moment. I can't quote chapter and verse. And Tucker says, well, it's in Genesis 12, but that's not important. What's more important is the fact that you actually base a significant amount of your beliefs as a man in power on something you cannot cite. And you know what? At the end of the day, he's kind of right. Okay.
Yeah,
yes, it's a little bit of a cheap.
problem.
It's a little bit of a cheap debate shot, right? Yeah. I can't quote chapter and verse all the time when I'm in the middle of a conversation on something I adamantly believe, right? So yeah, I can excuse that in Mr. Cruz, but he doesn't seem to know that this comes from Genesis 12. He doesn't know that. And you say, well, Jim, okay, you've given him the benefit of the doubt on this. Why even make an issue of it then? Well, let me tell you about Genesis 12. Before I do, let me say that Baptists know when I use the following statement, they know exactly what I mean when I say it. And Ted Cruz is a Baptist. That we are to be like Bereans. The Bereans were described in the New Testament as a people who didn't accept the word of an apostle speaking to them. They went back and looked at the written record. They tested what they were told. They knew what they were being told.
And so, this is like chapter and verse factual.
That is exactly right. You still should be able to do it. So Ted's response should have been, you know what? I'm sorry. At this moment, I'm not remembering it. But I promise you, if you will give me a moment to either look it up or we can give it to you after it's over, I will tell you exactly where that comes from and why I believe it. Okay? But I do know it's in there. Well, it wasn't in there because it doesn't say Israel. It says it to Abram. Genesis 12 begins by making this to Abram. I didn't say Abraham because God hadn't renamed him yet. He was Abram. He had just been told. And this is really important. This is a point that gets so often missed, and that they skip around the Bible to construct their story. Look at the context of the thing that's being said. Sometimes the answer is right in front of you. My wife is delightful. I watch movies with her, and she'll say, wait a minute, what about this? And literally the very next scene or the next sentence out of one of the actors' mouths is the answer to her question, okay? Yep. Which means they did a good job of writing their script because they knew exactly what the audience was anticipating.
Yep.
Okay, you could do this with Genesis 12, and I'm going to do it in front of you right now. So here's God saying, I'm going to make you a great nation. Your people are going to fill the earth, and through them they're going to be blessed. I will bless them who bless thee. I will curse them who curse thee. I'm going to look out for you is what he's saying. I'm going to make sure that you are able to accomplish this mission. Abram doesn't have children yet, so he has to live in order for that to happen, right? And God's saying, I'm going to provide comfort to you. Genesis 12.
Got your back.
Top of the chapter. What happens at the bottom half of the chapter? Well, he takes God up and begins following his commands, and he begins to move, and he makes his way through Egypt. And while he's there, because he's a rich man, he ends up meeting Pharaoh. And it turns out his wife, Abram's wife, Sarah, is attractive. And Pharaoh's attracted, and Abram gets scared. He begins to worry that he's going to get thrown in prison and murdered so that the Pharaoh could have Abram's wife, Sarah. So he gets with Sarah, and they concoct the lie, and he says, tell him you're my sister so that they won't kill me. And Pharaoh takes Sarah, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit biblical in a different sense, and he gets to know her. And Pharaoh is interrupted in his plans. Bad things start to happen. He realizes that the problem is that this is Abram's wife, and he comes back and says, why didn't you tell me this is your wife? And he shoos him out of town. He tells him, get out of here. Just leave. And Abram is glad to leave with his neck. Wait a minute. Wasn't he just told at the top of that chapter, just trust me. I'm going to see to it that you're taken care of. You're going to be a great nation. And the very first time he confronts the leader of the greatest nation on the planet at the time, he folds like a cheap tent. And it's right there. It's there in the chapter. But no, they take this and they make a whole nother thing out of it that isn't actually in the text. This promise wasn't made to Israel. It was made to Abram. And it was fulfilled. It was literally he was violating a promise or covenant that was made to him. And this pattern shows up in the Bible repeatedly of God making promises to people and them not trusting him and saying, okay, we'll try this again. We're going to do it this way. And them not trusting him, because this is a constant struggle we all have as people who believe.
It is the basic struggle.
Yes, we don't trust God. We just simply don't trust him. So this is a great juncture for us to bring up the meaning of the term apocalypse.
Yes. Often used, hardly correctly.
Most people, when they think of apocalypse, think of the word cataclysm.
Yeah.
That is not what it means.
It's not a catastrophe for people.
It is not a catastrophe. Everybody has experienced an apocalypse if they've ever been to a theater. The curtain gets pulled back, the stage opens up, and the play begins. That moment of pulling the curtain back, that is apocalypse. It means to open the box and look what's inside. It is showing what is unseen. So
there's a word, that's the reason it's called revelation, right?
It's called revelation. So what I would like to do is break here. And we are definitely going to need to do a part 2. And we will start there. We will talk about what the apocalypse shows and why this is, why as a libertarian in particular, I'm able to understand Revelation better now.